Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's NKBA KBIS design webinar, Designing for a Barrier-Free Future. As we continue our theme of universal design for the month of July, I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Maegan Blau, founder and principal designer of Blue Copper Design. Maegan, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Alicia. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to talk with everyone about what barrier-free design means and how to design for a barrier-free future. So once again, welcome everybody. My name is Maegan Blau. I'm the owner and principal designer of Blue Copper Design, and we are an interior design studio based in Phoenix, Arizona. We were founded in 2018 with the goal to blend beautiful interiors with accessibility for our clients. So our design philosophy revolves around creating inclusive homes and ultimately an inclusive world because we believe everyone deserves to live in a beautiful, elevated, and empowering home. So in this class, you will learn the difference between accessibility terms, why accessibility is important, how to implement barrier-free design elements in your projects, how to plan for longevity and adaptability for life's changes, and ultimately how to talk to your clients about these future or current accessibility needs. So first, we're going to start with accessibility terms. There are five different types of accessibility and ways to practice accessibility in interiors. So the first one is ADA design, and then we're going to be talking about universal design, also the Fair Housing Act, aging in place, and then barrier-free design. So starting with ADA design. So the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990. So it is about, 35 years old now? And it granted the rights to those with disabilities in multiple categories, which are listed here below. So the first category that the ADA granted rights to people with disabilities for is employment. So offering equal employment opportunities for those with disabilities, public services, public accommodations, telecommunications, and then a miscellaneous category. Now, the ADA is a living document and it does get added on to over time as well, but these are the 5 titles that it started out with. So when it comes to design and accessibility, what we're really looking at is Title 3, the public accommodations. So a lot of people use the term ADA design as a blanket term for accessibility, but technically it really only applies to a few public places, or most public places, I guess. So places of lodging, food and drink establishments, entertainment places, anywhere where someone's gathering, sales or rental establishments. The list kind of goes on here. So these are the places where the ADA applies. Now you'll notice where the ADA doesn't apply is homes, apartment complexes, and there are even some public areas that can be excluded from the ADA as well. But for the most part, buildings need to comply with ADA regulations as long as they are one of these kinds of establishments. So some visual examples of what ADA design can incorporate. Things like ramps and separate entrances. So if a building originally or was designed to have a staircase up to the entrance, adding on a ramp either after the fact or in a separate way would be considered ADA compliant. For a lot of other places, you might see a wheelchair lift as opposed to a ramp, if that makes more sense. You see this a lot in cities like New York or Boston, where they might not have the square footage to incorporate a ramp. Having a 5-foot turn radius in a bathroom or really anywhere is an example of ADA design, as well as placement of grab bars. So there are specific places, heights, lengths where grab bars need to be placed to be ADA compliant. Now, when it goes to places like restaurants and things, having a 30 to 32 inch table height seating is important. Now, this could also be great in an airport, anywhere where you're going to have some elevated or like counter or bar top seating. You also need to have a 30 to 32 inch table height seating as well to be ADA compliant. And 32-inch doors are actually specified in ADA law. A lot of people think it's 36, but to be technically ADA compliant, a 32-inch door will do the trick. Moving on to universal design. So universal design is a concept of design that was established in 1997. And the idea behind universal design is, how do we make spaces and products to be utilized in equal ways to the maximum amount of people? So like I said, universal design is not only for spaces, it can also be for product design. There's not any determined specifications for universal design. So universal design really relies more on that concept, where ADA design is going to rely on measurements, guidelines, or, actual hard numbers. You can actually find those numbers in the ADA documentation, where universal design is more of a checklist. Universal design also does not rely on accommodations. It's more proactive than reactive. So you'll see in some of these other types of accessibility, especially with ADA, there's going to be a list of like accommodations or a grace of accommodations that can be made for people. But universal design really wants everyone to have the same experience using it, no matter their abilities, age, or anything really. Like every person can use the space as equally as possible. So there's 7 principles of universal design. The first one is equitable use. The second is flexibility in use. The third is simple and intuitive use. The fourth is perceptible information. Fifth being tolerance for error. Sixth being low physical effort. And seventh being size and space for approach and use. So this is the checklist that you're going to go down and check every single concept when you're designing a space for universal design or a product. So a lot of these can be up to interpretation. A lot of them can be objective, depending on the designer or the person who's really creating these spaces. But it's also meant to be that way, so that we're really not tied to limitations of measurements, but really going for that concept. So some visual examples of universal design. In entrances, something like a 0-step entrance would be considered universal design. Obviously, this is also ADA compliant, but as you can see, something like a big superstore where there's just one automatic door with a 0-step entry, most people are going to use this, or everyone's really going to use this in the same way. Kind of going over into the product side, a good example of universal design is signs with symbols and text. So here you can say this, or you can see this as a crosswalk that says walk. Well, if someone doesn't speak English or doesn't read English, the little green walking guy can kind of get that message across as well. So, making sure that people with a lot of different abilities or lifestyles can be able to read signs and understand things as equally as the next person. Another simple example of universal design is a touchless faucet. Now, most people are going to use a touchless faucet the same way. Other examples would be an adult changing table in a public bathroom. So this bathroom actually has a lot of features going on, and you can kind of see that it would really accommodate a lot of different kinds of people. So we have a toilet with grab bars, but we also have an adult changing table with a Hoyer lift. So no matter what the person's ability is or needs are really with their bathing or toileting, they can accomplish that in this bathroom. But I feel like this really hits home the idea of inclusive spaces instead of othered spaces. So you can be ADA compliant in a space but it also can make people feel very othered. So if you constantly have a separate entrance or a separate seating area or just a separate anything, honestly, can make the person feel very othered as opposed to inclusive. So here with this playground was a good example of universal design, because somebody who uses a wheelchair can use these monkey bars just as somebody who isn't. And of course, automatic doors are a really, really good example of universal design, as in we use them equally. Okay. So I mentioned apartment complexes a little bit earlier and how they're actually not covered with the ADA law. So apartments and multifamily housing is actually compliant with the Fair Housing Act. So this was actually established in 1968, one of our first pieces of legislation for accessibility. And the Fair Housing Act protects people from discrimination in housing-related transactions. So this includes buying and renting, as well as financing a home, getting a mortgage, or just seeking housing assistance. The FHA prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, familial status, national origin, and disability. It also requires federal housing programs to promote fair housing. So here is where accommodations are going to come into play. So the Fair Housing Act really, really relies on making reasonable accommodations for their tenants. So both privately and publicly owned multifamily housing built after March of 1991 must meet the design and construction requirements for the Fair Housing Act. So the requirements are listed below. usable building entrance and accessible route throughout the property, accessible and usable public accommodations in the common spaces, usable doors, accessible route into and throughout the covered unit. This could be for parking or like a patio. Having light switches, outlets, thermostats, other things like that being usable. Reinforced walls for grab bars and usable kitchens and bathrooms. So as you can see, these requirements actually don't have they don't have any measurements or specific guidelines. So once again, this is up to a lot of interpretation of the landlord and then also the tenant. So this also does not have to be in every single unit that a multifamily property offers. It can just be in one or two or a pretty small percentage of the total units. So what this does is it really makes the tenant have to not only, find an apartment or find a unit that they like, but then also really negotiate with the landlord to get whatever their reasonable accommodations are considered. Now, of course, we all know that making changes costs money, and sometimes that can lead into kind of a lot of tension or delays or even fights between landlords and tenants to be able to get these accommodations completed in a timely manner as well. So some examples of the Fair Housing Act: accessible parking. So having accessible parking in apartment or multifamily complexes is required under the Fair Housing Act. Grab bars. So not necessarily a full accessible bathroom is required with a curbless shower or a roll under sink, even though this one does. Really, grab bars are one of the only things that are mentioned when it comes to accessibility in a multifamily units do have to accommodate service dogs. So if somebody does have a service dog, they do need to be accommodated outside of their pet policy. And then an accessible point of entry. So depending on what that looks like, it could be something as simple as a threshold ramp like this, or it could be something more permanent. Now, if the multifamily unit has common areas with a pool, it does need to require a pool lift or some kind of accessibility into the pool, as well as just the common areas in general. So making sure that someone with a mobility device of any kind can freely and equally move around the space. Okay, we're going to talk more about aging in place. So aging in place is also a concept. You'll kind of see a theme here with accessibility. But as people are wanting to stay in their homes more as they get older, we need to create spaces that are safe, that are comfortable, so that seniors can live independently or as independently as long as possible in their homes. So this extends, of course, to home design, but it also extends to household duties. Things like cooking, cleaning, financial management, transportation. Those are all included in aging in place. Now, there's specific design elements that are focused more to promote independence with aging as opposed to maybe other disabilities. And we're going to talk more about that right now. So some visual examples: having an extra bedroom for a caregiver. Now, this can be something that is more geared towards aging in place as opposed to somebody with another disability. Now, people with other disabilities might require caregivers, but we see a lot with the senior population that is a big ask and a big request, so that they do have an extra space, bedroom, bathroom for a caregiver. Even something like a life alert can be an example of aging in place. So obviously this is not a design feature, but it is something that can help somebody live independently and safely in their home. Walk-in tubs. So we find that these walk-in tubs are really geared more towards senior population or people with limited mobility. If somebody has very restricted or almost no mobility, this might not be a good option for them. But if somebody just needs, a little bit of assistance or gets tiresome in bathing, a walk-in tub can be really great for those people, especially seniors, to, help prevent slips, falls, things like that. Another thing to help prevent slips and falls would be a stair lift. So if somebody was, let's say, like completely paralyzed, a stair lift might actually still be very difficult for them to use. But if somebody has limited mobility or some aging needs that they're trying to preserve their body for, but can still, is still pretty ambulatory, a stair lift can be a really good option for them. Some product design. So things like kitchen tools, things that, might be able to open those pesky jars that are super hard to open, or just any kind of safety tool in the kitchen, especially, can be considered aging in place. If somebody, let's say they're completely independent, but they might be getting arthritis in their hand and they can't open jars like they used to. Something like this can really bridge that gap to independence. And then bathroom chairs. So things like elevated toilet seats or commode chairs can also be a really good feature to add if you're trying to age in place. Okay, and lastly, barrier-free design. So barrier-free design is probably one of the most loose concepts of all the ones that we're going to talk about today. It's really the concept of removing a barrier that would prevent a person from fully utilizing the space. So once again, no measurements, no requirements, no guidelines, more of a concept to be applied. It's really a customized approach to accessibility. As an interior designer, I feel like everything that we do is really customized, and we are trying our best to really provide our clients with spaces that they can use fully and that are beautiful. So it's the practice of creating spaces with minimal limitations so that everyone, like I said, is able to utilize the space. So some visual examples of things that can be a barrier and then be removed, to have that barrier be removed with barrier-free design. So things like pocket doors. Sometimes those door swings can really get in the way of a lot of space and movement and how we utilize the space, especially from a mobility device. So utilizing pocket doors or even barn doors can be a much easier way for somebody with a mobility device to manage opening and closing a door. Speaking of fun doors, things like a grocery garage door, or what the internet has now deemed a Costco door. So this is some small or large door really that opens from the garage directly into a kitchen or a pantry. So you can kind of see here there's cars in the background. And this can make it so getting groceries or really any item from your car into your home really doesn't have as long of a trek. So this could be a really big barrier for somebody. Maybe they can, go to the grocery store independently, but getting stuff into their house can just be a really big challenge for whatever reason. So something like this can actually remove a lot of barriers, or, carrying heavy things throughout the house can be hard. So this is a really cool option that, you're seeing in a lot of luxury homes, but can also be a really beneficial thing for accessibility. Something that I feel like we're seeing a lot of these days, which I'm very happy about, is drawer storage. You'll probably hear me say drawer a lot in this presentation because I just am such an advocate for them. I think having any kind of lower cabinetry with drawers instead of doors is a lot more accessible to everybody. We're really bringing the product to us instead of the other way around of, having to crawl into the back of the cabinets and get that pot that's all the way in the back of the cupboard. So drawer storage is huge, as well as induction stoves. So a lot of technology is going to be woven into accessible design, and I think induction stoves is such a great utilization of that. I think we probably are familiar with induction stoves, but if you're not, it's a stove that really uses magnetization with the pot to then create heat so that the surface of the stove stays cool or relatively cool. Moving on into the bathrooms, body sprays and handheld showers. Now, I think every shower in America or in the world needs to have a handheld shower for so many reasons. It makes cleaning so much easier. If you don't want to wash your hair as a girl, it makes it so much easier. But also for accessibility, like if somebody cannot move themselves into the line of water, having that water being able to be directed where they need it is absolutely crucial. But if you want to take it one step beyond that, which of course we always want to, body sprays is another thing that we can be adding into showers. Because, this handheld is great for directional water, but it doesn't really keep you warm in the shower. Or you really have to turn it away when you're sudsing up and using your soaps and things. Having strategically placed body sprays can make it so your client is always in that warm water and having a luxurious bath experience while, still being able to clean themselves properly. And then, of course, smart home technology. So I feel like there's a limitless amounts of things that we can be doing with smart home technology these days. I feel like I learn something new every day, even for my clients. But in any way, shape, or form that really reduces a person being able to have to physically go and turn something on or utilize something, reducing those trips or just reducing, the ease or the effort can be really important. So utilizing smart technology in any or every way that you can is going to be really helpful. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information, and the types of accessibility can get mixed up really easily. So something that I have learned a lot in my line of practice is how different these levels and types of accessibility are, but how often we interchange the words. But they really do have their own meanings, their own places. So for ADA design, it's really not a good place for residential applications. And the reason is a lot of places or a lot of homes might be difficult to renovate to get to that ADA standard. And that ADA standard actually might not be appropriate for the people living in the home. So we really, we can refer to the ADA in residential and kind of get guidelines, but as far as like checking the box and making sure our homes are ADA compliant, it might not be the best fit. However, it is a really great fit for commercial, even multifamily and hospitality uses. Same with universal design. We hear universal design being used for residential homes all the time. And though it's a great term, and I do understand what people are trying to get at when they're talking about having a universally designed home, universal design, like we mentioned, is really about creating a space that is the most accessible and the most usable by the most amount of people possible. And that concept just might not be appropriate for our residents. We might not need to be accommodating someone with blindness, aging, paralysis, a child with a disability all in one home. In my experience, we find that a lot of people just need a lot more customization to their own specific disabilities or, accessibility needs. But however, I find universal design to be the gold standard when it comes to commercial, multifamily, and hospitality. I think most ADA or most universal design places are ADA compliant, but not all ADA compliant spaces are universally designed. And I think universal design should be the standard moving forward, especially in public and commercial spaces. The Fair Housing Act is really appropriate for multifamily and multifamily only. In my opinion, I feel like it leaves a lot of holes, but in this application, it really is only good for that. And then aging in place. I think aging in place can be great for residential properties as well as multifamily. Commercial, like I said, I really would like to default to universal design for those spaces. But things like nursing homes or 55 and up communities, apartment complexes really should be practicing aging in place, maybe as well as universal design in their multifamily uses. And then as well as barrier-free design. So there is some overlap between barrier-free and aging in place as far as the concepts are involved. But it's really barrier-free design is really appropriate for residential practices. Okay, so moving on to the next section, we're going to talk more about who accessibility affects. So, of course, people with permanent disabilities are affected by accessibility. So 28% of American adults have a disability. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of disabilities. They're not all physical. Some are cognitive, some are hearing, some are vision, some are with self-care and independence. So here's the breakdown of this number of the 28%. But of course, not only people with permanent disabilities can be affected by inaccessible spaces. There's also a whole bunch of people who will experience a temporary disability at one time or another in their life. So this can be temporary disabilities can be something that incapacitates you for days, up to weeks, months, years. They usually result in an eventual recovery, but they can really be debilitating in the time where you are recovering from some kind of injury, illness, or disability. So things that include temporary disabilities are surgery, illness, even pregnancy can really be a disabling thing to people. Concussions, back and neck injuries, soft tissue damage, broken bones, sprains, strains, mental health conditions. So for the most part, I feel like we are all going to be experiencing one, if not multiple, of these conditions throughout our lives. And we really don't want our houses to be hindering us during those times. I can't tell you how many times we've had a client be like, I never thought about accessibility until I had to have knee surgery. And I realized I couldn't get up the stairs to go to my bathroom. I really wish I had a bathroom on the first floor. So things like that even can be a lot more relatable and a lot less dramatic or, catastrophized than a permanent disability. Of course, the senior population. So currently 17% of Americans are 65 and older. And by 2040, that number is estimated to jump to 22%. According to a 2024 Forbes Health report, 88% of adults between 50 and 80 believe it's important to stay in their homes as long as possible. Now, this is probably one of my favorite statistics of all time, but according to a 2019 census report, only 1 to 5% of homes currently have the features that seniors need as they age. So 1 to 5% of homes are deemed accessible for seniors. Currently, we have 17% of Americans who are 65 and older and fall into that category, with that number is only growing as time goes on. So we really have a huge disparity between the amount of housing and houses that we have versus the people that are needing those houses. And then, of course, children with disabilities. So opposite end of the senior population, but about 15% of children have a disability in America. Now, of course, this covers a lot of different kinds of disabilities, physical, cognitive, learning, speech, but children with disabilities usually grow up into adults, and so we need to be preparing for them to be able to also live in their homes as they age. Children have a big advantage of being small. And so when we have clients come to us whose children have disabilities, they're like, oh, I can just pick them up. I don't feel like I need a lot of accessibility features, but there's always a point where your child either can or wants to have more independence or you can't pick them up anymore. So we really do need to be focusing on how do we have children be as independent and have a really great childhood and growing experience in their homes as possible that isn't reliant on the parent or the caregiver. And then, of course, family, friends, and community. So it's not always the people that have the disability or the illness, whether it's permanent or temporary. Those people, me included, have family, friends, and community as well that should and want to accommodate their friends in their homes. So like we said, 28% of adults have a permanent disability. Many people will experience temporary disabilities. 17% of the population is over that age of 65, and 15% of children have a disability. And all of these people have a family, a friend, a community that they would like to be able to be hosted by in their homes as well. Okay, so because what we consider to do that we do as barrier-free design, we're going to go over some barrier-free design features by room. And the rooms we're going to talk about today is going to be the entryways, doors, and then bathrooms and kitchens, our favorites. Okay, so entryways. I always say if I can't get in the home or if somebody can't get in the home, whatever is in there really doesn't matter to me. So you want to make sure that you have an accessible point of entry into your house. And you can do that in multiple ways. One with a curbless entry point, that's my preferred. Or if that's not really a good option, having a ramp of some kind to the entry point. Now, I think most people already have this, which is good, but just really hitting home, having a 36-inch exterior door is super important. This can accommodate a lot of different mobility devices, and your furniture will be able to get in your home a lot easier too. Things like electric door openers, so having a lock that is tied to an app or some kind of smart feature can be a really great feature. Using lever door handles as opposed to knobs. So if anyone with limited hand dexterity, they can use the levers a lot easier. Even having an alarm system, or like I said, an entry system, this can really provide a lot of independence, safety, and for people living on their own. And then something that's called a T-pull door closer, which I'll get into a little bit later. So there's a few different ways that you can do a ramp. You can do a temporary ramp or a permanent ramp. A temporary ramp, this is something that obviously can be folded up or put away. It's not a permanent fixture to the home, but can offer a lot of accessibility. So this can be great for people who are experiencing one of those temporary disabilities or hosting somebody that they know uses a mobility device or has a disability, but they don't necessarily need a permanent ramp right away. Now, I think a lot of people need permanent ramps, and this can be a visual representation of what one could look like. Now, I think permanent ramps can be beautiful if you match the existing materials that's either on the porch or the sidewalk of the home. So whether that's pavers or concrete, wood, having that match and then, having a lot of cool details can be really pretty for a ramp option and also provide a lot of accessibility. Of course, zero threshold entry points are probably top tier, going back to the Target store entrance, having something be curbless or zero entry is really just makes everyone use the same door the same way. So however you need to achieve that is a really great option for people. And then, of course, we don't want to ever forget a driveway or a path of travel and being able to make sure that somebody can get from the outside of the home into the inside of the home. Oh, that's a typo there. Sorry. But this is what I was referring to as a T-pull door closer. So this little mechanism is affixed to the door on the opposite side of where the door handle goes. So if somebody is sitting in a wheelchair and they need to close the door, they can grab this little T-pull door closer here and be able to close the door without having to reach all the way through the width of the door to grab the door handle. Now, these come in a lot of different colors, and they're just such a great addition. I put them in all of our projects because once you use it, like, you'll never want to go back. And then if you don't necessarily need a ramp, maybe it's an apartment complex or you already have just a little 4-inch rise up to the door, you can use something as a threshold ramp. And of course, this can also be a permanent fixture as well. But something like this can be great for apartment complexes. Okay, talking about doors. So we're going to be talking about interior doors here. We talked about having a 36-inch or bigger minimum, like absolute minimum exterior door. And for interior doors, depending on, how the house is laid out and what we can get, we strive for a 32-inch door minimum on our interior doors in our projects. If we can, we will go to the full 36. We're finding that the scale of a lot of homes being built now can really handle a 36-inch door without it looking oversized or out of place. So the bigger the door, the better. Of course, we want to make sure that our hallways are wide at least 42 inches, if not wider. Some of our renovations, we really do only get to have our 42-inch doors. Some of our renovations, 42-inch wide hallways, but some of our renovations we can go, we have 8 feet of hallway, but we really always make sure that we have the 42 inches. Like I mentioned with our barrier-free design with pocket doors and barn doors, we're going to have some examples of that here, as well as electric door openers. So the electric door openers are where you can push the button on the wall or wave your hand and have the door automatically open. There are a lot of different kinds of those, and they do make them for residences. You also can use commercial ones on residential properties, no problem, but there's a lot of different options for that. And you can also put them on interior doors, not just exterior doors to a home. Once again, lever door handles and then a T-pull door closer can be used exterior or interior. So some visual examples, having a smart lock, like we mentioned in the entryway, and then having an electric door opener as well. So this is kind of a more basic or rudimentary option where you have the door hinge here. They do make a lot of more aesthetic or sleek ones, or there's ways to build this in to not have it just look like an electric door opener. But this can be like a really big independence gain for people. Of course, I think we know the difference between pocket doors and barn doors, but just showcasing that having a door that slides one way or the other can be really beneficial to eliminate that door swing. Okay, talking about bathrooms. So we find that a lot of our clients are in between the 32-inch and 36-inch on their countertops, with more people going to 34 or 36 inches, which I know can be kind of counterintuitive if they're using a wheelchair or a mobility device. But something that we like to bring up is there's a whole bunch of different kinds of mobility devices. There's manual chairs, there's walkers, there's power chairs, there's scooters. And for somebody who's in a motorized mobility device, like a power chair or a scooter, they actually typically sit higher than a traditional standard chair height. And because of that, a 36-inch countertop might be a better option for them so that they have the knee clearance that they need, and the sink is actually at a really good proportional height. So this is a really good example of how barrier-free design is customized and not just set at a certain standard. Of course, we like to incorporate roll under sinks, and a 4-foot turn radius is always our goal. If we can get bigger, that's great, but we always try to at least get 4 feet. A bidet toilet can really impact the independence of somebody. That toileting, we all have to use the bathroom. And so being able to do that in a clean, safe way is really important, and a bidet can really give that to people. Similar to lever and knob door handles, we like to always use cabinet pulls instead of knobs, and incorporate curbless showers, of course. We're seeing this a lot in luxury bathrooms right now, but this can really be make or break for people from being able to use a shower independently or not. Once again, drawer storage, and then having grab bars placed, or at least backing the walls for grab bars for future use. Like I said, every shower in the world needs a handheld shower, so of course we're putting those in our bathrooms, as well as a possible heat lamp. So some people with disabilities have a difficulty with regulating their temperature, whether that is hot or cold or both. And a lot of our clients actually have that concern when we're doing something that's maybe a little bit bigger shower, or they have taller ceilings. They're always concerned about being hot or cold. Or mostly cold in the shower. And so incorporating a heat lamp can be a really, really good add into a bathroom. Of course, outlets inside of cabinetry, padded shower chair, smart home, faucets and lighting, wherever you put a smart home, tilting mirrors, and a vanity tower can all complete an accessible bathroom. So here's some visual representations of accessibility in bathrooms. So now, not everybody wants to be getting rid of their tubs. I know that that's a huge trend right now, and I totally understand. I will always opt for a shower over a tub if we have limited space, but sometimes clients have the space for a tub and want to keep them. And depending on a client's ability, you can do tubs with transfer ledges. So this is actually one of our projects where our client really enjoyed taking tubs, and they could actually get in and out of the bathtub themselves, even though they were paralyzed from a wheelchair. But it was a little sketchy. So we wanted to be able to increase the safety of that transfer for them. So we built out, I believe this is a 14-inch ledge here so that they have a safe place to transfer to, as well as a grab bar for extra stability getting in and out of the tub. And you'll even see we put a handheld shower on this tub as well, because I'm such an advocate of them. This picture here on the right is a good example of a roll under sink. We also showcase tilting mirrors and a vanity tower with some drawers and poles. Here's a good example of a handheld shower head and then grab bars. So when it comes to residential applications, you can put the grab bars wherever you want. You don't have to apply, or you don't have to adhere to the ADA outlines of that. So having, really getting in those spaces with your clients and being, taking into account how tall they are. Are they going to be sitting? Are they children who are going to be growing? Who's utilizing the shower? And really customizing that measurement and height to them. And then, of course, curbless showers. I think every home should have at least one curbless shower. Some other options for bathrooms, utilizing these pull-down closet rods. Now, this picture is obviously pretty old, and I've actually seen that they have motorized options for these now, which is fantastic because sometimes this can get a little heavy. Also, utilizing a wet room could be a really good option for a client if they, are utilizing a caregiver, they have a smaller bathroom. A wet room can be a really good option for a lot of people where, obviously everything can get wet and the whole room kind of can become a shower safely. Okay. Moving on to our last room, kitchens. As far as kitchens, we're going to have some of the same requirements and features from bathrooms. One of those being a countertop. So your main countertop area, we find a lot of people can manage with the 34 to 36 inch height if we have a lowered prep area. So depending on, their ability, we can customize this measurement, but we find that 30 to 34 inches for prep, it can be really great. Some people can get away with 36 inches for prep, and that's completely fine. But we like to have a dedicated prep space in our kitchens, as well as that 4-foot turn radius again. Something like an appliance garage can be a really good accessibility add to a kitchen. Of course, we're going to be using cabinet pulls. And here is where I'm going to talk about drawers over and over again, both in storage and then also in appliances. So utilizing drawer refrigerators, freezers, of course, our microwaves can all be really, really great things to add if somebody is having a barrier with their appliances. Something like an electric can opener. Now, this is obviously a super simple one that doesn't necessarily need to be built in, but it kind of goes back to that aging in place picture of, being able to maybe not utilize a can opener like you used to be able to. Induction stoves are great. And then even extending the toe kick to 10 or more inches. Sometimes that's all people need. They might not need a full roll under prep or sink area. Maybe they just need a little bit of that extra toe kick if they're sitting in a wheelchair to be able to pull up a little bit closer to the cabinetry. Making sure our outlets are accessible, either putting them on the sidewalls or having to pop up in the counter. Sometimes reaching across, to a back wall where an outlet is can be a challenge. Things like pull-out cutting boards, now that can be a really great way to get a prep area in, or as we'll see, putting it under a stove for hot things can be a really great idea. Of course, in an ideal world, we would like to incorporate roll under areas as much as possible. So whether that's the prep area or a roll under sink or a roll under stove. Of course, smart home appliances, this is a great area to utilize that since there's so many products with that feature. And then a wall oven with a swing door. So there's a lot of different ways to do roll under cabinetry. We can do the full roll under cabinetry where someone can have the full depth of the cabinet to roll under, or we can do some indented cabinetry depending on what's important or needed for your client. This is also an example of an extended toe kick here. So I don't know the exact measurement of this, but when we do it, it's usually about 10 inches or so. But like I said, this can really be a game changer for people. And I feel like there's a lot of cool design ways to incorporate lowered prep areas that are not othered. So we're kind of incorporating some universal design techniques there, but they also can look really stylish and intentional. So something like this island here really accomplishes that lowered prep area that's still in good proximity to the kitchen, but it doesn't feel like it's meant for accessibility. It really feels like it's a cool design feature. And then here is that swing door wall oven I was talking about. So this, as we know, these wall appliances can really be put anywhere at any height. And having the swing door can make it really accessible for someone to reach in and out of the oven. And then, bonus points for a pull-out cutting board under it. Now, there are really high-tech things like electric cabinets where, you can press a button and have the things from the upper cabinetry be brought down to you. I will say I try to avoid these as much as possible. That's just like a personal design preference of mine. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily. I just try to find if I can utilize the lower storage the most for storage and things, like I find that to be a better option, just because I'm like, who do I call if this breaks? Because one thing that we know is things that are electric or motorized tend to break. And once again, if that's what someone's relying on for them to be able to utilize their kitchen, that can put them in a weird spot. So that's my caveat with electric cabinets, although I think they're very cool and very useful and can be great in a lot of applications. And then, of course, drawer appliances. We're all familiar with our microwave drawers, but as we know, they make fridges, freezers, even dishwashers and drawers. Okay, so the fun part, how to talk to our clients about accessibility. I know that a lot of people can struggle with this if it doesn't come naturally. And I'm going to give you some pointers on how to break down that wall and be able to, really talk to clients about accessibility and, talk about why it's important. So my first piece of advice is to ask your clients questions. I think as home and industry professionals, this is what we do all day. And maybe just incorporating a few that kind of tie to accessibility can be a really big way to bridge the gap between where your project is and how to get it into talking more about accessibility with your clients. So questions like, how long are you planning on living here? We are probably asking our clients that anyway. Do you envision going through another renovation in 5 to 7 years? Now, maybe your clients are in their 60s or in their 70s and they haven't brought up accessibility, but you kind of know, like, hey, in the next 5 to 7 years, you might need some of these features. And you probably don't want to go through this process again. You could be really honest and upfront. Have you thought about including accessible features in this home? And then we find that it's best to lead with general statistics in the beginning, rather than asking personal medical questions. So someone might not be super comfortable sharing their medical history with you, and that's completely fine. But we can kind of go back to the statistics of 28% of people in America are living with a disability. 17% are over the age of 65, and that number keeps growing, even the 15% of children with disabilities. So that can kind of bring it down and bring it into a more tangible sense for your clients. I think our job as designers is to identify our clients' pain points in everything, and accessibility is no exception to that. So we've all been hired by our clients to do just that. We all know it's not about just making those pretty designs and getting their furniture installed. It's really honing in and teaching our clients what they don't already know. So saying something like, I heard you saying that your in-laws may have some surgeries coming up. Is there anything that we can implement in your home during this renovation that can make caring for them easier to manage? So always, I understand that pain point is that your in-laws are going to have surgery. Another pain point could be your in-laws may need to live with you during that time, and we can solve that during this renovation. Sharing real life examples is, I think, always the most powerful and relatable way to talk about anything, especially accessibility. So most people know someone or will know somebody in their life that could benefit from accessibility features. And you probably probably can think of somebody who's like, oh yeah, my dad went through a surgery, or I had a friend who had a car accident, or my friend had a child born with a disability. Like we all have some relation to it. If it's not direct within ourselves, it's probably pretty close in our inner circle. So saying something like, I didn't put much thought into having a bathroom on the first floor either, but I'm so glad that I did because when my husband had knee surgery, he couldn't go up and down the stairs, and I don't know what we would have done to manage that. So really like putting that into a real life story that someone can relate to can be like, oh yeah, of course, like that makes total sense. Let's incorporate some of these features into our design plan now. Of course, planning for the future. I feel like all of our goals is to live a long life. And that means that we are going to be living in the future and we are going to be aging. And that's a really beautiful and great thing. So as designers, I feel like it's our job to make homes that fit the criteria of our client and make them comfortable. And adding that longevity, I feel like that's a lot of people's goals, especially now with moving rates going down, people are wanting to stay in their homes longer. So let's help our clients do that. We can say something like, I hear you say this is your forever home. Have you thought about adding in some accessibility features so that's possible? Most people will need some kind of accommodation as their life progresses, and I would love for this home to work for you as long as you want to be here. So this could work for somebody in their 40s or 50s. It could also work for somebody in their 30s too. Like if somebody is like, hey, this is my dream home, my forever home, I never want to leave. Cool. Let's make it so that you don't have to leave. Let's add some accessibility features, and I promise we'll make it look cool and you'll have your longevity in your home that you're wishing for. And then, of course, accessibility is aesthetics. So, gone are the days where accessibility is ugly, it's hospital-like, we're using plastic grab bars, things are like pieced together. Like that does not need to happen these days. We are all really talented designers and industry professionals, and we can definitely put our clients' minds at ease with this. So saying things like, oh, I know some people think making an accessible bathroom will make it feel like a hospital. Like those days are over. There's so many gorgeous product options. And actually a lot of luxury homes have some unintentional accessibility features that will work for us. Plus, I would never let any of my projects be ugly. My word on that. I think like this is something that we can really easily put our clients' mind at ease. Show them a bathroom like this. I mean, this is an accessible bathroom as far as what we can see. Like there's a curbless entry point. This isn't really a roll under sink probably, but we could have made it that way. And this is going to look way cooler than the majority of bathrooms being done these days. So don't have to worry about it being ugly. It can definitely be aesthetic. And then of course, making it fun instead of awkward. I think bringing your personality of your firm or yourself into this can really, break down that barrier of what a lot of people find to be awkward when it comes to accessibility. So saying something like, I recently read an article about how some of our Americans are wanting to age in place instead of going into nursing homes. Is that something that you thought about with this house? I mean, we're all getting older. Like we don't have to have this be such a sterile conversation. And then of course, showcasing the value. So, as designers, I feel like resale value is something that we always are talking about. Personally, I'm like, don't worry about it. We're going to make your home better than it is. So we don't need to harp too much on that, but it is a big concern for clients, whether it's their forever home or not. And I think showcasing the value of homes of accessibility in the home is going to be a really big game changer, especially if someone's a little trepidatious financially. So like I said, only 1% to 5% of homes are considered to be accessible currently. And we already do not have enough accessible homes for what people are needing, let alone in the future. So adding accessibility into your home will increase the value of your home because there's simple supply and demand with that. We have no supply, we are having increasing demand. And being able to say that to your clients is super, super important, especially if we're making it really aesthetic and beautiful and gorgeous and better than their non-accessible houses down the street. Okay, so that kind of wraps up my presentation. In conclusion, I have my minimums. So I know we talked about a lot of different features, and not every single house is going to have all of those features in one house. It might not be necessary, but this is a list of my minimums. So minimum, I want every house to have an accessible point of entry. I want every house to have at least 32-inch interior doors. A bedroom and a bathroom with a roll-in shower on the first floor is a really important minimum to have. All showers, no matter what they are, having grab bar backing so that if you don't need grab bars now, you know that you can add them in the future. Of course, all showers to have those handheld shower heads. Bidet toilets. Could be something as simple as just putting the outlet there for the future if someone's not really like sold on it now, like that's such an easy ad to do during the construction process. But, talking about bidets, I think a lot of more people are opening and having an open mind and like really wanting a bidet toilet once we talk about the features of them. Cabinets that can be converted into a roll under. Now, this can be a little bit where you have to get creative, maybe with a custom cabinet maker or something like that. But I think having some kind of roll under cabinet is a really important feature. Drawer storage in kitchen and bathrooms, transfer friendly furniture, and then, of course, ordering, I feel like we usually do, but having maybe a little bit extra flooring to use if somebody does have to do some renovations later on where they may have to move a wall or do cabinetry. I can't tell you how many times I've had to replace the floors in our clients' projects that really didn't need replacing. We just didn't have the extra floor to accommodate the changes that we were making. So that can be a really big cost saving tool down the road. And here is what we covered. There's several different versions of accessibility. Residential accessibility should be customized to the homeowner's needs. Accessibility affects us all in one way or another. Only 1 to 5% of homes are suitable for people with accessibility needs currently. Talking to your clients about accessibility adds longevity and value to their home, and we're only as limited as our space is. Here are some resources if you want to learn more about accessibility. These websites are great resources. We have a lot of information on our website as well. And then there's also a bunch of certifications that you can get. So with NKBA, they offer a certified living in place professional program that I highly recommend taking if you want to gain that certification or more in-depth knowledge on this subject. And thank you to everyone for listening, and I really appreciate anytime anyone asks me and listens to me talk about accessibility. I just think it's such a great topic that needs a lot more exposure and light shed on it. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate such a thoughtful and informative webinar for us today. We do have a ton of questions coming in. Before we get started, just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions as we're going through, please put them in the Q&A function. So if we're not able to get to it today, we can make sure Megan receives them and can respond via email. With that, let's get right into it. Megan, our first question is, do you have any tips if your house is a side split or back split multi-floor layout with stairs? How can you make something like that accessible?
That's a good question, and also a really difficult one from an accessibility standpoint. I'm kind of thinking of like a multi-split home. It kind of goes back to, what does accessibility mean to you and your client? So if it's a specific home, really gearing that. But if you're just trying to do like general accessibility as far as like an accessible point of entry, is there a place that you can maybe add a separate door to get on the main level? Without having to navigate stairs, like from the front door, the garage door, that could be something to consider. And then also on that main level, like making sure that you have a bedroom and bathroom on there as well. I have seen some people put like actual permanent ramps into homes. That's not my most favorite way to approach that, though it's not, like I said, not wrong. It's just a design preference. But I would really see if there's something you can do like with the exterior, with the grading, if like the front door, like I said, the current doors right now are not, not a really good accessible point because there's so many stairs. Like see if you can add in another door or another entrance so that you can get onto that main level. So I hope that helped.
Perfect. That actually blends perfectly into our next question. Someone asked, I've heard of HOAs having strict rules around ramps. Obviously, this depends on the community, but do you know any information around the legality of how many restrictions they're allowed to put on those types of things?
That's a good question. It definitely depends on the HOA, but from a legality standpoint, no, I don't know. I haven't had any problems. I think dealing with HOA and getting that submittal. But all of we mostly deal with renovation. So all of our ramps that we put in, we match to the current material of the front of the house, which in Arizona is mostly concrete. And then we also match like the color and the texture of the concrete. I've never had any pushback from HOA. And if an HOA does push back on you, I mean, I would take that like to the fullest extent of all of the courts. Because I feel like there would have to be some kind of legal like there would be something that would make that illegal. I just personally don't know what that is, and I'm sure it's different per area and HOA, but I feel like they should not discriminate. They should not be discriminating at all when it comes to accessibility needs.
Perfect. I love that. I think that's a great answer.
Mhm.
Um, Someone asked, do you know of any programs that help fund universal design accommodations?
That's a good question. From like a residential standpoint, I actually don't. There's been a couple times where clients have just come to us after they've gotten funding, whether that's from an organization or like crowdfunding through like a GoFundMe or something. The only one that I do know of is through the VA. The VA probably has one of the best programs I've heard of. They have a very specific number in mind, or very specific number for accommodations, and it's something like $126,732 or something. Like it's an actual specific number. But of course, that doesn't apply to people who aren't veterans, and it also doesn't even apply to some people who are, which is like a whole other topic. Um, so long story short, no. And I think that's a common misconception that I hear just on like the internet whenever I post, is people assume that like your health insurance is covering that, or there are some government programs that cover that, and there really isn't. I mean, it does depend by state. Like I know Arizona has a specific state-run program, but it's an extremely low number to be able to renovate a bathroom. Like you can't, there's a organization here in the valley that does that. And I'm like, how do you guys make money or even make ends meet? And they're like, we don't. We lose money on our projects all the time, like every single project, because what the state covers is never enough to renovate even a simple bathroom renovation. It's like $3,000 or something. So um I don't, but if anybody does know of any programs that I'm missing, I'm always open and would love to hear from other people on that too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Someone asked about universal design as it relates to actual products. Do you
Mhm.
know of maybe a specific brand or line of products that's helpful with these accommodations? Obviously, you touched on like touchless faucets and things like that. Is there anything you lean to when you're designing?
That's Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I saw that question come through too, specifically like with plumbing products. And from my understanding, there's not really a brand that's like vocalizing that their products are being made specifically for accessibility or universal design. And I've been talking with some brands to try to change that. So I hope to make some changes on that in the future. But some of these questions are really customized. Like I find that typically like a single-handed faucet is a little bit easier for more people to use, but I actually will have a client come through that like that's a harder product for them to use. So that's where like the concept of universal design in a residential sense gets a little tricky, because it's almost like there's not ever going to be one product that like really works for everybody, unless it's a touchless faucet or like a automatic door. But a lot of people don't want a touchless like commercial kind of faucet in their house because it doesn't have the constant stream of water. So it's almost like it's a pros and cons list, I guess, is my point. But there is so a single-handed lever faucet usually works well. Anything with a lever instead of like a cross, like, or a T handle usually works better. And then I will say there is one specific product from Delta that I do like. I don't remember the name of it, but it has like, it's a bathroom faucet that has a pull down like a kitchen faucet would. So if somebody had a hard time, like, if they spit their toothpaste and it's not in the line of water, like you could use the faucet to kind of like clean the sink out. And I used that in a recent project and our clients loved it. So
Amazing. I appreciate that insight.
yeah.
We had a few questions about wheelchairs. Specifically, do you personally find a 60-inch turning radius adequate, or do you feel like anything from 48 inches to 67 inches works well, especially in kitchens and bathrooms?
Yeah, I find for most manual chair users, um, 48 inches works. Of course, 60 inches works. For power chair users, 60 inches could be too small. just depending. So a lot of, chairs are very specific to people's bodies and then their functions. Some people's chairs are much more compact, where others take up more surface area. So if it takes up more surface area, like a power chair, or if their feet or their foot plate sticks out further, they're going to need a bigger turn radius. But for most manual chair users, I find 48 inches to be sufficient.
Perfect. Someone asked, for a wet room, do you have a brand of slip-resistant tile treatment you recommend? There's several out there, but I haven't found the best one yet.
I don't have a specific brand either. I mean, for our projects, we're really like, finding the product when the client comes to us. We've used a lot of Bedrosian's tiles though, both for availability, price point, and they do have a lot of good slip resistance that have worked for us. So I can't remember the lines, but I would check out Bedrosian's. That's the one that we probably use more often than not.
Perfect. Kind of bringing it back to the bathroom, someone asked, can the T pole be adhered to the shower glass doors, or is there a similar option for shower glass?
That's a good question. As far as I know, they can't. They have an adhesive, and then they also have like screws. So I don't think that the adhesive is definitely not waterproof, and like the screws obviously wouldn't work, but I'm pretty good. I have a pretty good rapport with them, and that's actually a really good idea. So I wonder if I can kind of get them to make one of those. As far as another option, no, I don't have another option for shower doors.
Perfect. Kind of going back to the ramp discussion that we were talking about, someone asked, do you have any tips for adding the ramp to the entry without making it look odd? They said they find that these tend to overwhelm the front of the house. I know, obviously, you said you work a lot with concrete in Arizona. Have you found any tips or tricks to make it look more seamless in the design?
I would say make the ramp as long as you possibly can, so it has a very shallow, like gradual slope. And then, of course, matching the material. So whether that's like decking, pavers, concrete, etc. Um, my trick is to do just that. Just make it as gradual as possible, so that when you're looking at it, like it almost doesn't look like a ramp. So, like go beyond. For the ADA, they recommend 1 inch per foot. So, um, I would I would even go more gradual than that. And then you could even,
Perfect.
depending on the material, like you could curve the edges so it doesn't have to have like a sharp drop off or a 90-degree edge on the ramp. Like you could slope it down depending on how the exterior is set up.
Perfect. Thank you. Someone asked, do you have a recommendation for a swing door oven that won't break the bank?
Um, I mean, I don't know what considers not breaking the bank. I know Cafe Appliance also has like a French door oven, which is really cool. I think because Cafe is GE, I think GE does have one too, if I can remember correctly. And then as far as swing door ovens, I know Bosch has them. So all of those are not the cheapest, but I think wall ovens inherently are, more expensive than a range. So to me, the value is there. And I think it's about talking about that to your clients. Like it might be a little bit more cost, but you're going to get a lot more value in the future.
Right. Just going back to that pros and cons list.
Yeah.
Um, So you did discuss you touched on it a little bit earlier as well, but someone asked, with your experience in retrofitting older homes, when does it become better to move versus renovate?
That's a really good question and totally like situation dependent. I think when your budget, I think it just completely comes down to budget. Anything can be done. I mean, we all know that as professionals, like with the right amount of time and money, like we can do anything. But is it worth it? Is it worth it to the client? Is it worth it to, whatever their like wish list is? So yeah, I would just say like get the contractor bid and weigh the pros and cons once again. It could also completely depend on the time. I mean, right now, like purchasing homes seems to be a challenge. So it might be more expensive, or it might be more money than you're wanting to spend to renovate. But moving is also a financial, burden and detriment, and you might not be able to go through that process. So to me, it comes down to money.
Perfect. And then our final question before we wrap up for today, someone is just saying how much they enjoyed the webinar, and they were wondering if all of this work that you do with physical disability and universal design, do you also take into account cognitive disabilities like Alzheimer's when you're designing?
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. For people with cognitive disabilities, we focus a lot on safety, a lot on them protecting themselves from themselves, especially when it comes to water and heat. I think those are the two biggest ones. But we also find that people with cognitive disabilities, they usually have caregiver help. So we're also designing, safety for the person with the disability, but then ease of use for their caregiver. And because of that, like we actually might be putting things in like a inaccessible place. Like we might want to actually put like dishes up higher, something where like if somebody if having access to products or things is a danger to them, we want to get it like out of reach. So it's kind of like an inverse situation, and then that way like those items are only accessible to a caregiver. So it really depends on the person's disability, their cognitive abilities, and then their situation with their caregivers and things. But that's what we find. But yes, we do deal with that as well.
That's amazing. That's an interesting perspective I never thought of before. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Um, Before we end for today, Maegan, I just want to give you the floor and give you a few moments to just leave us with some last words.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone. This was an amazing turnout. Like I said, when I wrapped up, like I'm just always so grateful and honored when people take a liking to accessibility and understand the importance, because all too often people are having to deal with it in the most inopportune time in their life. And I think there's a huge misconception for people who've never had to deal with it, like, oh, I'll just deal with it later. But later means you're going through a health crisis, and renovating your house through a health crisis is like the worst thing that anyone ever wants to do. I'm like, have you ever gone through a renovation? Have you ever built a new home? Have you ever moved? Like, you don't want to do that when you're dealing with a health change in your life or with a family member. So I think being proactive with accessibility is always better. And I just want to see more of it. So I'm happy to see, all of these people show up and really take a liking to that. And I appreciate it because it's something I live with every day. And I know other people don't, but I also know how many people do. And just increasing accessibility is what I'm here to do. So thank you so much. If you want to get in contact with me, all of our social media is Blue Copper Design. Our website is bluecopper.design, or you can just Google us and we'll pop up. And then we have my phone number and email here. So I offer services to clients, and then we also offer consulting for contractors, designers, and other industry professionals. If you do have a project where you want to like pick our brain or get our accessibility info on, we're more than happy to do that. So thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you so much, Maegan. As a reminder to everyone, we will be sending out Maegan's info as well in an email by the end of today. Please remember to fill out the survey and give Maegan all of the amazing feedback that I'm seeing in the chat right now. I know it'll be great to share with her. Additionally, this will be available on demand tomorrow at nkba.org. Maegan, thank you again for sharing such an informative and important presentation with us. And thank you to our wonderful audience. We appreciate your time. And until next time, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.